Panic in the Kremlin, a real nightmare in Kaliningrad. US spy planes have been circling the exclave. Nato is not sitting still. F-35 rotations and nuclear readiness drills at Volkel are live. Green men spotted on the Estonia border. Russian forces enter phase 0. And armored columns are rumbling toward Finland. The Kremlin is daring the West. The nuclear red button hangs ominously over every line. One wrong move and everything changes. What happens next? Let's talk about it. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I'm Maria Farafonova, and here are the latest news. One wrong move and Kaliningrad could be destroyed. A statement from Hodges, the former commander of US Army Europe, shocked many. He warned that if Russia launches an attack on Poland similar to its invasion of Ukraine, NATO forces would destroy Kaliningrad within first hours.
In the first hours, Kaliningrad would be gone. All Russian targets would be destroyed. Any military sites in Sevastopol as well. Direct comparisons with Ukraine are inappropriate.
He stressed that if the West had clearly warned Russia in 2022, don't you dare do this or we will give Ukraine everything it needs, and made restoring Ukraine's sovereignty the objective, the war would have had a different outcome. Hodges criticized the West for its indecision.
We spent years talking about Russia's nuclear threats or negotiating its withdrawal from Ukraine instead of taking action.
Meanwhile, tensions between Russia and the West are rising. The US reconnaissance plane had already been spotted near Kaliningrad. The US Air Force describes the combat sand as an aircraft that provides strategic electronic intelligence to the President and the Secretary of Defense, senior Defense Department leaders, and theater commanders.
By detecting and identifying the signals of foreign military ground, naval, and airborne radars, the combat scent collects and closely analyzes each system, providing strategic analysis for the military.
The aircraft are easy to recognize by their distinctive antenna arrays on the chin and wingtips, large spots on the sides, and the elongated tail. The crew typically includes 2 pilots, a navigator, 2 flight engineers, at least 10 electronic warfare officers known as crows, and additional technical specialists. Flight tracking data showed that the combat scent departed the UK, flew over the Baltic states, and circled Kaliningrad, the Russian exclave between Poland and Lithuania, before returning to Britain. The mission took place the day after German Chancellor Friedrich Merz accused Russia of waging hybrid warfare against Germany. Merz blamed President Vladimir Putin for reconnaissance drones that caused disruption at Munich airport.
He is waging an information war against us. He is waging an armed war against Ukraine, and that war is directed against all of us.
NATO is not standing idle in the face of danger. Annual nuclear exercises are kicking off at Volkel Air Base in the Netherlands.
We need to do this because it helps us to make sure that our nuclear deterrent remains as credible and as safe and as secure and as effective as possible. It also sends a clear signal to any potential adversary that we will and can protect and defend all allies against all threats.
Allied aircraft, including Dutch F-35A jets and other planes from NATO member states, are taking part in the maneuvers. The exercise aimed to test the readiness and effectiveness of NATO's nuclear deterrence systems. Meanwhile, Putin's forces are already at NATO's doorstep. He's steering straight toward Europe and NATO, and all the signs point to danger for the entire continent. The dictator has unleashed drones, but that's only the beginning. What comes next could be 100 times worse. A black cloud of threat hangs over us as the Kremlin ramps up at the furious pace. Can the United West stop him in time? Find out in a moment.
The Kremlin is expanding the geography of the war. Europe and NATO are preparing for a possible invasion by the Russian dictator.
It needs to be done subtly, carefully, but it absolutely must be done.
Drones are increasingly violating the airspace of European countries. Such incidents have been recorded in Denmark, Norway, Romania, and Poland. In this way, the Kremlin is increasing pressure on Europe through hybrid attacks and preparations for a large-scale conflict. Poland remains first and foremost in the risk zone. The strike on September 10th is a deliberate, carefully planned Russian strategy.
Poland is currently one of the priorities for the Russian Federation, one of, not the only one, but one of them. Why? Because it is precisely through Polish territory that a huge amount of military cargo is transported toward Ukraine and the Ukrainian fronts. And in Russia, they are well aware if this route is cut off, then Ukraine is left, its logistics are interrupted, in other words, severed, and it will have to be rebuilt. And at that point, it would indeed be possible to achieve some territorial gains.
And also, in the event of an invasion of Poland, Russia may be preparing a force of 100 to 150,000 personnel to implement the Suwałki corridor scenario.
At the moment, up to 40,000 Polish troops have been redeployed directly to the borders with the Republic of Belarus. Similar actions are being carried out in the Baltic states as well. In addition, at the moment, the naval component of joint NATO exercises is taking place in the Baltic Sea.
There are also increasing reports that Russia may attack the Baltic countries. Since the beginning of the large-scale war in Ukraine, Russian forces have increased the number of provocations in the Baltic region.
It is now clear that the Russian Federation does not have the forces for a full-scale invasion like the one carried out in Ukraine. Although our military notes that over the past 8 months at the front, there has indeed been a gradual decrease in the amount of Russian equipment destroyed each month. In other words, the graphs have been trending lower and lower since January-February, specifically for 3 types of weaponry: air defense systems, tanks, and infantry fighting vehicles. So there is a wide margin here, a lot of room for speculation. Why? Either they have started producing fewer tanks and IFVs, or they are producing them but hiding them somewhere for some other purpose.
Another pretext to start a war is the Estonian city of Narva. It is located in the east of the country. A small river separates it from Russia. Already today, in the narratives of Kremlin propaganda, Narva is portrayed as a city where Russians are actively humiliated by Estonians.
These are roughly 200 to 300 of Gherkin's gunmen who could infiltrate a settlement, say Narva, and carry out the same scenario as they did in Crimea and Donetsk. They seize the post office, the telephone exchange, the telegraph, the town hall, the mayor, and declare the creation of some kind of people's republic. And then they ask, Putin, send in the troops. This scenario is entirely realistic.
Only in Russia do they shout from all sides that they don't want a war with Europe and NATO. The alcoholic ex-president Medvedev claims that Russia has supposedly always come to Europe only as a liberator, not as an invader. And Putin's notorious spokeswoman Maria Zakharova has started accusing Ukraine of preparing an anti-Russian provocation. Supposedly, Russian drones are being used in Poland and Romania to push NATO into war against Russia.
This message was from the Foreign Intelligence Service of the Russian Federation. I saw it yesterday. A very funny message. Let me explain why it's funny. The Foreign Intelligence Service of the Russian Federation is a paper tiger. It's not even a paper tiger, it's more like a plu, a paper bear. This organization isn't even respected within the Russian security hierarchy. They're not respected, not feared, and not seen as authoritative, even by ordinary district police officers. And so all that's left for this service is to come up with, to generate some random ideas, random conspiracies, just to show that their work is important.
In response to Russia's threats, NATO and EU countries are urgently strengthening their defenses, creating a drone wall, and discussing providing Ukraine with air defense systems to build a shield. After Russia violated Polish airspace, NATO launched Operation Eastern Guard. Denmark has called up several hundred reservists. The soldiers have been ordered to report as soon as possible.
At the moment, air units are being redeployed to the territory of Poland and Romania. These are NATO's flanks. In addition, NATO countries are redeploying ground units to the territory of the Baltic states. Naval exercises are being conducted in the waters of the Baltic Sea. It should be noted that the newest United States aircraft carrier is currently in the relevant waters of Denmark. And this is a serious signal to the Russian Federation. In addition, French Rafale jets have been deployed to Polish territory, and these are nuclear-capable aircraft.
In fact, Russia began threatening NATO as far back as 10 years ago. At that time, Turkey, led by Erdogan, was in the crosshairs. Back in 2015, a Russian bomber violated the country's airspace. According to Turkish authorities, the Russian aircraft did not respond to warnings before it was shot down by an F-16 fighter jet. Now, Putin's strategic goal is the collapse of the collective West and the undermining of trust among NATO members.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Putin's appetite is growing by the minute. Green men have been spotted on the Estonia border. The Russian army is moving into the so-called Phase Zero. Tallinn didn't waste a moment, reacted immediately. The Kremlin is trotting out a familiar narrative. So what is Putin really preparing in the Baltics? The latest on this in the report ahead.
Putin's little green men are already at Estonia's doorstep. It looks like the bunker dweller is preparing a Crimea 2.0 operation in Europe. Western media are publishing footage in which you can see armed men on the road. Judging by their uniforms, it's clear these are definitely not Russian border guards. Due to this sudden activation of unidentified Russian troops in the areas of checkpoints between Russia and Estonia, the police department has urgently closed the country's eastern borders. We decided to close the road to prevent possible provocations and incidents. Our main goal is the safety of the Estonian population. Künte Pidosk, operational head of the southern prefecture. The safety of our own population is the top priority for all Baltic countries. For example, today Latvia is expelling at least 841 Russian citizens from the country. These are Russians who were unable to prove even a basic knowledge of the Latvian language. The EU country no longer wants to see the Kremlin's fifth column on its territory.
The stay of such Russians in Latvia will be considered illegal, and their access to social services will be closed. If these Russians remain, they will face deportation. Madara Puke, representative of the Latvian Office of Citizenship and Migration Affairs.
Due to the possible Russian attack on NATO, the alliance is preparing to evacuate 1.2 million people. According to the authorities of Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, this is the number of citizens who would need to flee from war in the event of aggression from the Kremlin. This concerns at least a 40-kilometer strip along the borders with Russia and Belarus. For Lithuania, this would mean a total evacuation. In this case, even the capital would fall into the potential frontline zone. However, in Vilnius, they are confident that such a scenario is unlikely.
An emergency of such scale, which would require evacuating Vilnius entirely, is unlikely to develop in just one day. That is, it may well be necessary to start with some localized evacuations of the eastern outskirts of the city or even individual neighborhoods. But we proceed from the assumption that ultimately our resources must be prepared for the evacuation of all 600,000 residents of Vilnius.
Meanwhile, in Estonia, which has closed its borders, local churches, schools, universities and sports arenas are already actively preparing to receive internally displaced persons. Special transportation, trains and buses are being allocated for this purpose. Residents are being assigned to potential evacuation points and given maps and information about the evacuation routes. Europeans themselves are stocking up on provisions, first aid kits and packing emergency bags in case they need to flee suddenly.
People have been talking about this for a long time. For the past several weeks, even months. At work, everywhere. We'll see how things turn out. For now, we need to take care of the most urgent things.
In total, the population of the Baltic countries exceeds 6 million people. Of these, almost 2.9 million live in Lithuania, nearly 2 million in Latvia, and 1.4 million people in Estonia. In Vilnius, evacuation plans are being prepared for about a quarter of the population, in Latvia for a third, and in Estonia for 10%. And that's taking into account the most optimistic forecasts. According to military analysts, if Putin launches a full-scale offensive against the Baltic countries, every single resident there could become a displaced person.
They have platforms for various types of missile weaponry, which can strike in the shortest possible time. As one of our sources told us, these systems can literally be rolled out of garages, for example, at the Luga military base, 100 kilometers from the Estonian border, loaded with Iskander missiles in 5 minutes, and launched in quantities that would cover the entire territory of Estonia and most of Latvia.
Meanwhile, Russian propaganda is foaming at the mouth, insisting that the Kremlin's intentions are purely peaceful and that the Baltic countries supposedly have nothing to fear. Even the bunker dweller himself, putting on an innocent face, tries to reassure the West.
We ourselves have never initiated military confrontation. It is pointless, unnecessary, simply not needed, and simply absurd. They can't possibly believe this. They can't possibly believe what they're saying, that Russia is planning to attack NATO. Because it's impossible to believe such nonsense.
In much the same way, right before February 2022, Moscow was insisting that they had no intention of invading Ukraine. Earlier in 2014, Putin also denied the involvement of Russian army soldiers in the annexation of Crimea. So it's no surprise, as soon as the little green men appeared, the Baltic countries began preparing for the worst.
The nature of hybrid warfare is such that you might not realize, is this already a war, a single attack, or just an accident? Take, for example, the damaged communication cables in the Baltic Sea or the plane that recently crashed in Lithuania. An attack or an accident? Not to mention the constant problems with GPS signals in the area of the Suwałki corridor.
And adding fuel to the fire at NATO's border is Putin's loyal friend, Alexander Lukashenko. The latter has resorted to yet another dirty provocation. He suddenly put the Belarusian troops on alert. The country's Ministry of Defense cheerfully reported that units are already moving out to designated areas to carry out the tasks assigned by the leader.
The armed forces units, which are involved in the crucial combat readiness check, are currently moving to their specifically assigned operational areas.
However, analysts insist that all of this is more for show than actual preparation for a real invasion. Belarus will continue to constantly escalate the situation and threaten with combat readiness checks. As for the Russian army, it is so bogged down in the war in Ukraine that the Kremlin simply doesn't have the resources to open a second front. Nevertheless, everything could change quickly.
Recruiting new soldiers takes quite a long time. But in principle, this is probably a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. Because there are enough combat-ready units at the front in Ukraine, so all that's needed is to simply transfer them. That wouldn't take much time, and then arm them somehow, reorganize them.
Among experts, there is an opinion that Russia is already preparing for war with NATO and could strike earlier than intelligence agencies expect. For example, the American Institute for the Study of War claims that Moscow has entered the so-called Phase 0 in preparing for a confrontation with the alliance. Russia is creating reserves and developing new tactics for waging war without the mass use of armored vehicles, and is capable of launching new aggression without waiting for the full restoration of its army after the war with Ukraine. Whether Putin will lose his nerve or actually attack the Baltic countries, we will find out very soon.
What do you think about the latest events? Share your opinion in the comments, like the video, and stay informed about the main headlines. More to come.